The scene in today's gospel presents a familiar experience. That's the experience of being an outsider. The scene is that a woman, unaccompanied, approaches some men, a group of men, which isn't done, and she's a Gentile, and they're Jews, and that's not done, and she asks a favor. And that was all inappropriate. She's an outsider there. And if there was any doubt, we can just take even the beginning of that interchange where she cries out to Jesus, hey, my daughter's possessed, I need some help here. And Jesus says nothing. Doesn't look at her. Then the disciples say, get rid of her. She's a pest. Talk about feeling like an outsider. And it's a feeling which we have all had at some time, and I would suggest probably many times in our lives. When we first went to school, or when we changed schools, or when I went to the seminary, I came a year after my classmate had gathered. How do you break into the in crowd? Or when you go to a new job, who's going to be nice to me? Who will say hi? I know people in the military or other people who have had jobs, looking for a job, have moved from place to place to place. You got to find a new neighborhood. You got to find a new parish. How do you get in? There's the feeling of being an outsider, and that's just socially. There's also a spiritual outsider experience. Here's what I mean. If I've been praying my heart out, and I'm praying, and it doesn't seem to me like that prayer is being answered, I can feel like an outsider to God. Theologically, I know in my head I'm not, but I'm talking about feeling. Well, God must not be listening to me. He's got more important things to do. I guess I don't count. Or another outsider spiritual experience is if we've sinned. We've done something, we know it's wrong, we feel the guilt, and it's like Psalm 51 says, I know my offense, and my sin is always before me. And it starts to weigh us down, and we wonder about forgiveness. That's an outsider feeling. Or the last one I'll mention will be, we belong to a Christian community, except it's not acting so Christian at the moment. I don't know if you've ever been the subject of gossip from Christian people. I have. Doesn't feel very good. So in that, we might be able to identify at least a little bit with this Canaanite woman who comes to Jesus as an outsider. And I propose that she is an example to us. An example who doesn't accept the outsider designation and moves past it. It moves past the boundaries. It moves past the barriers that keeps people apart. For as Jesus says later, she had great faith. So her experience is this. She goes to Jesus, and he says nothing. Doesn't even look at her. The apostles say, get rid of her. And then when they say that, Jesus turns to her, which is an improvement. Now he's looking at her. Okay, I admit your existence. And he says, I was only sent to the lost children of the house of Israel. Well, at least he's looking at her. Well, now she says, Lord, help me. He's engaged her, and she speaks to her. Lord, help me. And then he says, it's not right to take the food of the children and give it to the dogs. What? Jesus said that? I read a bunch of commentaries about this, trying to understand it better, and one thing they say is it was not uncommon for the Jews and the Gentiles to talk to each other as dogs, so that was just a common thing and no big deal, maybe, although it still wasn't a compliment. A couple other commentators says, well, the word they use for dogs is really like a puppy or a household pet. Okay, let's go with that. A household pet, like a puppy. Well, I can remember several times, at one time in particular, I'm with a family in their home and they got a little puppy. And I'm sitting down to eat with the family and I'm pretty sure I'm going to get some food. But I'm not sure the puppy thought that. Because it's running around looking, and the puppy knows, even though it's not sure it's going to get some food, it knows the one to whom to go. Who's the weak link around that table who's most likely to disobey the rule of no food from the table for the dog? Because there's always one, isn't there? At least. So that's what this woman was. She was the one who knew to whom to go. And she went back to Jesus. Because up until now, we can well surmise that Jesus is acting out of his humanity. He knows that he was sent for the lost children of the house of Israel. And she pushes him further to advance the vision of his mission. In his humanity, he saw that the vision of his mission was to the lost people of the house of Israel. And then when she says, yes, but even the dogs get the scraps from the table, it awakened in him a deeper sense of his divinity. And now he's not acting just out of his humanity, but out of his divinity where it touches the goodness and the love and the compassion of God. And several commentators says they can imagine when she said that, Jesus just laughing. You got me. That's right. I know better deep down. Touching that love and the compassion, he acts out his divinity and says, your child is healed. When we feel like an outsider, she is a model for us about what to do. Not to give up and to move on in. And especially to go to God, to go to Christ. Because, in a sense, he's the weak link around the table. He will feed us. And there's just one other aspect I want to talk about that. That as we know what it's like to be an outsider, there are outsiders around us who need us to reach out to them and to be there for them. To let their need of being alone and isolated touch the deeper parts of ourselves as well. The divine part in us, because God has made his home in each one of us. And to let their plea for help, whether it comes through a word or through a look on their face, even like when we gather back there. You ever notice some people just kind of seems to be alone, doesn't know who to talk to? Let that touch the deeper parts of our hearts. Or at the job, or wherever. Let it touch, and then to act out of that spot and to reach out. Whether they're Catholics or Presbyterians or Buddhists, they're all welcome in God's table. We heard that at the end of the first reading where it says, all people are called and are welcomed into God's house of prayer. All people. So, I'm going to close with this story. And it's a story about the Serbo-Croatian War, which took place around between 1991 and 1995. And there was a Franciscan of Mercy there herself who was a Croat, but grew up in Serbia. And she had been working with rape victims from Bosnia, as well as trying to find housing for many refugees. So here's what she'd do. Dressed in her nun's habit, she would walk up to a house and knock on the door and yell into it, I have no place to stay. I'm hungry. Can you take me in? They would look out the little window in their door and see the nun in the habit. And Croatia is a deeply Catholic country, so the answer to the nun's plea was almost always, "Of course, sister, come in." Then, when they opened the door, the sister would step back and let the people see the real 2 or 3 refugees that she was asking to let stay there. She said, "As you would accept me, will you accept these?" They were usually taken in by the family.